Hey guys, it's Sarah here with my service dog Bailey. You can see her nose right there. She's trying to take a nap in my lap right now. And today's video is really about flying with a service dog and flying with an emotional support animal. And I'm not really going to talk as much about what that takes. If you guys have specific questions, obviously ask them and I'd be happy to help to the best of my ability. But I kind of want to talk about what we think the rules should be. The Department of Transportation recently gave notice of a proposed rule change for how they handle the Air Carrier Access Act and how it relates to service animals and emotional support animals. And it's caused a lot of controversy. It seems that everyone has different opinions on what kind of animals should be allowed, what the restrictions should be, whether or not there should be documentation. And so I figured I would kind of try to create a space for people to talk about this and hopefully have some meaningful discussion going on. This video is not meant to attack anybody with any particular opinions, but I am going to say my own opinions. You are free to disagree with me, and if you do disagree, comment down below and maybe we can have a meaningful discussion about this. So before I go on my rant about how I think this should work, I want to explain a little bit about the Department of Transportation's proposed rule. So I have my laptop down here. I'm going to read off some of the things that the rule is supposed to cover. So first of all, this proposed rule would define a service animal as only a dog that's individually trained to do tasks or work for a person with a disability. So this would mean that miniature horses aren't included in this and no other animals are included. The proposed rule also says emotional support animals wouldn't be covered as assistance animals for flying anymore, so airlines could treat them as pets. The rule would consider psychiatric service animals and every other kind of service animal to be in one category, which is different because now psychiatric service animals, even if they're task trained, are considered ESAs for the purpose of the Air Carrier Access Act. The Department of Transportation also proposed some forms that handlers could have to fill out. It would be optional for airlines to require these forms, but these would theoretically be the standardized forms that all airlines would be able to use for all service animals. And it covers things like vaccines, the health of the animal, training, something that you sign that says my animal is trained and they're not going to go nuts. Another part of the rule would be that airlines would potentially be allowed to ask handlers to arrive at the airport 1 hour earlier than other passengers. So instead of 2 hours early, they could require 3 hours early. But the rule also says that airlines would be required to check in passengers with service animals very promptly, so they wouldn't be able to make you wait that full hour, like show up early and then wait an hour to check in. Another part of the rule would be that airlines could limit the number of service animals per passenger to 2, and they would require that those animals have to fit within the foot space of the passenger. So even though the rule says that the animal has to fit within your foot space, it doesn't really say if airlines have to allow you to move to somewhere with bulkhead seating or extra leg room, like the current law does. Right now, if you request, because of a service animal or medical need, to move to somewhere with more leg room, as long as you're not being bumped to like first class or something, airlines have to give you that accommodation. But the new proposed rule doesn't say anything about that, so I'm not sure if that's still covered. There are 3 things that this proposed rule says would continue. One of those things is that airlines would continue to be allowed to require passengers with service animals to have that service animal on a leash or tethered or harnessed in some way. Another thing that they say would be continued is that airlines would still be allowed to remove or deny access to animals that exhibit aggressive behavior and pose a risk to the health and safety of others. And the last thing that they say would continue is that airlines would be prohibited from having breed bans or breed restrictions for service animals. For this last one, it says that they will continue to prohibit breed restrictions, but airlines like Delta have been implementing breed restrictions and denying access to legitimate service animal handlers just because of how their service dog looks. They've been doing that for a really long time, and they aren't really being reprimanded for it. It doesn't seem like whatever enforcement mechanisms the Department of Transportation has are working. So even though it says it will continue to be prohibited, it is almost like it's not prohibited right now because it's not being enforced in a way that makes the airlines comply. That's basically a summary of what the rules are. I will have a link to the full document and to the full docket on regulations.gov. I also will suggest that anyone who watches this video definitely read through the comments, develop your own opinion on this, understand how you feel and how you think it would impact others and what you think is right. And please, please, please comment that. Enter it as a public comment. You can do that anonymously. And it's so important that you do that because the Department of Transportation needs to hear from the public if they're going to make an educated decision. So they need to understand a wide, diverse amount of voices in order to make decisions that are going to help a wide, diverse amount of people. So definitely develop your own opinions and make your voice heard. With that said, now I'm going to talk a little bit about what I think should happen. Personally, I believe that the Air Carrier Access Act and how it treats service animals should really mirror the Americans with Disabilities Act. I think that it would be much easier and better, and it would cause a lot less confusion and a lot less issues with fakes if or untrained animals if there was a unified rule, and if that rule applied, across the board for airlines and for regular public access. And right now for the ADA, that rule basically is that a service animal is a dog or miniature horse that is individually task trained to assist someone with mitigating their disability. And that animal has to remain under control. And if they're not under control, business owners can ask them to leave and they can be removed. On top of that, if someone doesn't answer the two questions that businesses can ask, which are, is that a service animal required for a disability, and what tasks or work does it perform? If they don't answer those questions in a way that fits with the law, then they can also be asked to leave. And I think this allows for the broadest amount of protections for disabled people that use service animals. And I personally think that if businesses and the public were better educated about what the restrictions of this law are and what they could ask of patrons that bring animals into their establishments, I think we wouldn't have issues of untrained dogs and fakes out in public. I really think that that issue would be resolved because the ability to kick out untrained animals, animals that are not under control, or animals that aren't really service animals, to kick them out, that's already built into the law. It's just that it isn't being used by businesses. So I think that's a really effective law, despite the issues that are coming up because people don't follow the law. So I think that airplanes and airports should be treated in very much the same way. This unified, stance would make it easier for handlers, it would make it easier for the public, and it would make it easier for business owners. I think that they should ask you the two questions, and they should be able to judge like we trust any other business to judge if an animal is under control and if the handler is taking appropriate steps to get the animal under control. obviously, you know, emergency landing a plane to kick an animal off is not the same as kicking someone out of a store or stopping a bus or train, you know, by emergency. But if really businesses were taking a preventative measure and just asking the questions and making sure that they are maintaining a standard of behavior and asking people to leave if they aren't meeting that standard of behavior, then I think everything would run so much smoother. Especially because in airports, not only do you check in with staff, then you go through security, which you're around tons of other staff. It's a crowded area. If an animal is out of control or untrained, you will be able to tell in that kind of environment. So they get through TSA and then they go to the gate and there's another staff member that they have to interact with. And then once you're on the plane, there's another staff member that you have to interact with. So compared to going to a store, which you might only see the cashier or a couple employees, it seems to me that it should be easier to protect people from untrained animals in that kind of environment. So that being said, I totally understand where people are coming from with some of the other points. You know, people who need to fly with ESAs. I understand that, you know, that might be the only way that person is going to travel that distance is if they have an ESA with them. I understand that before Bailey was fully trained, she flew as an ESA because, you know, she wasn't task trained when I first took her to school. And so she was classified as an ESA. And she got through just fine with, you know, the little obedience that she had. And I understand where those people are coming from. But I also understand the perspective of the handler, because not knowing what kind of animals you're going to run into and if it could potentially ruin the years of training you put into your dog, it's scary. And I also don't want to be interrogated or show medical information or have to go to the vet and get paperwork signed every time I have to fly or something like that. So those are the kind of things that I've seen people talk about and consider with this issue. I'm sure that everyone watching has some strong opinions on this, so please comment down below and have a really thorough discussion about what should happen here, and definitely submit a public comment. I will have the link to submitting a public comment and to see the full document so that you can read through it yourself in the description below. Please make your voice heard. Please discuss with others. Comments that are not productive are not welcome here. Please make sure your comments are not mean or attacking other people, but instead think about what the consequences and the impacts of this proposed rule and of your ideal rule, what those consequences would be. I would love to see a really wonderful, thoughtful discussion in the comments down below. And I think that the service dog community can be mature enough to discuss these things in a very kind and thoughtful way and respecting of each other's opinions. I don't expect for anyone's opinion to be changed, but I do expect for people's opinions to be respected and for people to make an effort to understand other people in the comments below. Because if we don't at least try to understand the perspective of others, who's to say that someone should try to understand our perspective? So thank you guys so much for watching. I am definitely looking forward to what the comment section is going to be and the kinds of discussions that we have down there. As always, I will see you in my next video. Please subscribe if you'd like to see more. And thanks for watching. Bye. Say goodbye, Bailey. Say goodbye to the camera.